Welcome to the Grow Fast podcast, where we talk with leading sales, marketing, and personal growth experts about how companies can accelerate sales, optimize marketing, and grow their businesses fast. Let's go. Hey, Todd. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Likewise. Hey, that's a pretty cool phone you got in the back there. I wonder if our kids would even know what that is.
Yeah, I joke that when cool people are doing cool things on the weekends, I'm ear deep in late 1800s and early 1900s books and magazines on sales and sales management. And one of the representations of that is this phone. That's a fully restored phone from 1908. It's got original wiring on the inside. The bell still rings. I haven't been able to hook it up to anything, but
I was going to say, who can you call, man? There's got to be but no.
Yeah, so that one's 1908, and then over my shoulder here that's a 1921 fully restored from SC Electric. Again, original wiring. The thing is a beaut, and I collect this kind of crap.
That's awesome. I love it. I'm actually, I'm thinking I would like to go get an old payphone. Just because, kids would be like, what is that? It's like,
yeah, I was just talking to somebody.
Call somebody.
Exactly. I was just telling somebody that my first sales job, I had a huge territory. I lived in Southern California, and I had a pager. And literally one of the things that I prided myself on is I knew the location of every payphone. Like if my pager went off, I got to get to one of them. I knew where all of them were. And no one would have a pager and a payphone. What are you talking about? So,
exactly. Yeah. Why wouldn't you just use your cell phone? We didn't have cell phones.
Exactly.
And you probably had a Thompson guide to navigate your way around, or some kind of map or something, right?
Always,
and people, because I don't know if you gave a map to any average 20-year-old if they would even know how to operate that damn thing. They'd be like,
right.
Where am I?
Your expertise in focus on knowing where everything is back then.
Yeah.
Because today, all you got to do is put it in your GPS and you go, and you stop paying attention to where the heck you even are.
Yeah.
The GPS goes down, you're screwed.
Exactly. And it does happen occasionally. It's funny. I lived in, maybe 7, 8 different countries, and a couple of countries that I used to sell in, Japan and Korea, the roads were built several hundred years ago, right? And then the addresses oftentimes were not like in order 1, 2, 3, 4. It was in the order that the houses were built. So and then offices were similar in some of these older neighborhoods. And so back in the day, every time that we would go out for a customer visit, we'd have to ask them to fax us. For people that don't know what a fax machine is, no, I'm joking, but they would fax us a map. But it would always be like a hand rendered, So,
yeah.
But you're pretty good at it. Hey, you are a sales historian. You do a sales podcast. You have a couple different books that you published on selling. I want to talk to you about all of that. But let's start with the historian part first, because we start talking about the phones and things like that. And a lot of times I hear sales has changed. What you were doing back in the day doesn't apply to us today. And I would say, well, hey, there's some age-old principles that kind of still do apply. But let me ask you, you were talking about studying, from sales leaders back in the 1800s even. What lessons can you learn from people way back then?
Well, yeah, I think first of all, the answer is that at its core, sales has not changed at all, like zero. I recently just wrote about this, where one of the things I did, so one of these books is from the 1920s, and it starts with a sharing of multiple sales philosophers from the previous 20 years, so 1900 to 1925, just sharing their definition of what sales is. And I'm confident that if I shared all of those with you, you would say, yeah, that's what sales is, without me telling you it's 100 years old.
What's the name of that book before you go on any further?
Let's see, which one was it? It's one of these here. I'm going to have to get back to you on
that
one.
Okay. I'll put it in if you get back to me, I'll put it in the show notes, because that's
yeah. Cool. I've got this whole collection behind me is all late 1800s, early 1900s. There's just a massive collection, and the book starts with that.
Yeah,
and it's pretty cool. And there's an article written on my blog at toddcaponi.com. You go to the blog. The title is "Sales Hasn't Changed," so you can find all of those definitions there. But it's funny that when we talk about dedicated territories. We talk about onboarding. We talk about the way that we interview. We talk about sales kickoffs. All of those are almost exactly the same foundationally and structurally as they were in the 1890s. Sales compensation, the way quotas are delivered, all the same. Now, there are a couple lessons, Mark, that of things they did right that we do wrong today. And of course, there was some wacky stuff that they did strange back then that we'd look back on and go, what were they thinking?
Right.
I'll tell you two things that they did really smart that we get wrong today. Actually, two and a half. Let me start with one of those quotes of what sales is. So there's a guy from his book, The Art of Selling, which is one of the ones back here. His name is Arthur Sheldon. Mm-hmm. I believe he is the GOAT of sales philosophers. He wrote this book, The Art of Selling, in 1911. He defined sales like this, and I love it. It's one of my favorite sales quotes of all time. He simply says, true salesmanship is the science of service. Grasp that thought firmly and never let go. All right, so service, being a service professional. Now, let's go back to your question about is sales changed or not. You know, we talk so much like, hey, the biggest driver in sales evolution is this idea that, quote, buyers know more nowadays, right? Buyers know more nowadays.
Yeah,
sure they do. Well,
I mean, that's I hear that all the time. They say like, buyers are educating themselves and then they're going to reach out to you. And so, your role is, just to add a little color to it. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly right. So buyers, they've got more information, access to more information. It's a threat to the profession. It means that we need to change. Those 4 words, buyers know more nowadays, is in one of the books to my right here from 1910.
Oh my gosh.
Thomas Herbert Russell wrote a book called Salesmanship, Theory and Practice. And he talks about the idea that, hey, the rise of mail order catalogs and advertising means buyers know more nowadays. They don't want to deal with you. I mean, down here, for anybody who's watching and not listening, this is a 1908 Sears Roebuck catalog. Now, in it, you could buy everything. This is like Amazon,
back in the day.
Paper.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, there's a page, like there's a Department of Human Hair. You could buy everything, right? The exact same challenges were being faced 110 years ago that are being talked about everywhere today. What that means, going back to Arthur Sheldon's quote, is sales has always flourished and survived through the lens of service, meaning more information available to buyers has never made it easier on them. It's actually made it harder. And when we as salespeople see through that lens and go, hey, listen, my role is to be your guide, to help you achieve optimal outcomes, whether it's with me or with somebody else, do that homework for you, expose the good and the bad. That's when everybody wins. That's when customers buy, stay, buy more, become advocates for you, take you with them to their next company. And so it's that long game thinking, which is what pervaded sales forever. And the people that think that way are the ones that will always have a strong and healthy career.
I am 100% aligned with what you're saying, because I'm in it for the long haul, and I want to develop trusting relationships with my customers. And then I've had customer relationships that have gone on for 25 years. It's amazing, or either they're coming back to buy or they're sending business my way. But, to step into that trusted advisor role takes a little bit of work, because people, people are a little bit on guard these days, right? And maybe not just these days, maybe even back in the day. So let me ask you, what are some of the, best practices for convincing people that you do want to serve them?
Well, yeah. So you mentioned my books. The first book was called The Transparency Sale. And I'll explain the basis for why, like a lunatic, I quit my job and wrote a book that I thought would possibly suck, because what did I know about writing? So here's what happened. I was the chief revenue officer of a company here in Chicago where I'm based called Power Reviews. You probably guessed from the name we were in the review space. Mm-hmm. And you've interacted with the technology and probably didn't know it. We were kind of the back end for 1,000 retailers and brands. So like, buy a pair of Crocs. You look at the shoes, you scroll down, there's reviews. That was us doing the collect and display for them, and Vineyard Vines. And again, 1,000 other retailers. Here's what happened. We partnered with Northwestern University here just to look at buyer behavior when a website is acting as a salesperson. All right, so what do people do? So nothing to do with B2B or human-to-human selling, or so I thought. The research comes back. There was 3 data points that stood out at me that changed my life, right? Like I quit my job and wrote a book. Data point number 1 that didn't change my life, that was no surprise, is that we all read reviews today.
Mm-hmm.
Right, when we're buying something we've never bought before that's of medium to high consideration, meaning it's not a pack of gum, it matters. All of us read reviews. All right,
Yep.
No surprise. Here's the 2 that changed my life. Number 1 is, for all of you listening, like, are you one of those weirdos that skips the 5-star reviews and reads the negative ones first? Like reads the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s first? That doesn't make you a weirdo. Makes you a human being.
Yeah.
Almost all of us skip the 5-star reviews and go to the negatives first. And then the last piece is a product, and this is across all product categories, but on average, that has an average review score on a 5-star scale between a 4.2 and a 4.5. That's optimal for purchase conversion. Meaning, a product that has negative reviews right under it will sell at a higher conversion rate than a product that has nothing but perfect 5-star reviews. Perfection actually turns us off. Product that's got nothing but perfect 5-star reviews, we at a subconscious level look at and go, I don't trust those reviews.
Yeah.
Right? And so I looked at that and I was like, all right, wait, a product that has negatives right under it, that we read first, that actually aids the buyer in making a more informed, confident decision when a website's acting as a salesperson. Does that apply to human or B2B? And so I started digging into it. I am a nerd. Like I wanted to get to the bottom of it. I found a neuroscientist at DePaul University because I'm not smart enough to understand what I was reading, and basically confirmed, like, yeah, like we as human beings, we don't buy when we're convinced to buy. Or if we are convinced, we're probably pissed about it 20 minutes later. We buy when we can predict. Like we're trying to make a prediction. And at a subconscious level, we know perfection doesn't exist. So we can't.
It's like it's dubious, right? We're like, I don't know if I can trust this, but.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can't trigger that prediction. And so I started going, all right, how would that apply to B2B or human to human selling? And how can we use this? So we started dabbling around with it a little bit. Essentially going into sales situations and just saying, hey, Mark, listen, before we get too deep into this, here's what we're not great at, right? Like for what you're looking to do, we're not going to be the best in the world at this. Let's talk about that first, because if you're cool with that, we're pretty awesome at this. We're trying to be the best in the world at this, right? Embracing what you give up to be great at your core. Leading with what they might feel isn't going to be a fit. Again, they're looking for the negative first. We do both. We present ourselves as pretty cool, pretty good, as Tyra Banks would call it, flawesome, right? We're flawed, but still awesome. And we lead to what our greatness is instead of leading with it. That disarms the buying brain. It triggers faster decisions. It builds trust, qualifies in faster, qualifies out the deals you're going to lose anyway faster, and differentiates you in the way that you sell. That's the core concept of the book, The Transparency Sale, the behavioral science. And then like, how do we actually apply this to all we do? And builds trust, and there's magic behind it. We started doing it. We became Chicago's fastest growing tech company from 2014 to 2017. And I was like, I got to get these ideas out there, and off I went.
That is an awesome story, and I love it, and it does resonate with my experience selling. Where maybe not the exact same approach, but if we're not good at something, why try to force it on the customer? Why not just be honest and open with them, transparent with them, and say, hey, you know what, that's not our thing, and let me go back and talk with the people in the office and see if we have a solution. If not, maybe I can make some recommendations for you or something like that, right?
And I will add one thing to that, Mark.
Yeah, please.
I was saying that exact same thing during a virtual keynote I was given. This is a couple of years ago. So during COVID, I said that. And I noticed in the chat, somebody wrote, no. And I was like, And so I was stopped. I was like, hey, whoever wrote no, can I talk to you for a second? Like, I want to hear why you're saying no. She got on. And to your point, she was like, hey, listen, economy's tough. If we get a prospect, like we got to go get them, even if we're not the best solution for them. And I was like, all right, so you get that deal done.
Right.
You jam it in. What do you do when they realize later that you weren't the best solution for them? And she said, we managed through the dissatisfaction. And I was like, hey, listen, this is, at the time it was 2022. The proliferation of feedback and peer connections on everything we do, buy, and experience means, hey, congrats, you got that one deal. But I'm telling you, it will cost you 4 or 5 more deals that you never even knew about because of that individual's ability to share. And so the long game plays, helps us win the long game. But if you do it right, it helps you win the short game too. And I think we all have to have that lens that it's not, hey, it's a qualified opportunity if they've got something other than lint in their wallet. No, it's got to be the right fit. It's got to be a good fit. We've got to play that long.
Yeah, and that's the other important part of your approach or the transparency approach is you find out right away, are they a legit prospect or is it just somebody they're looking for something completely different? And a lot of, I guess I would say junior salespeople sometimes are afraid to kind of address that. They kind of want to dance around that issue when it comes to qualification. And I'm like, no, let's get it out there and talk about it. And if we're not a good fit, you know what, we're not, I've been in a situation recently where I was coaching somebody and they were very apologetic because the customer was asking the question, well, can you guys do this? And apologetic and then making long explanations as to why they couldn't do it. And I said, what are you doing? Just say, no, that's not our strength. Here's what our strength is. And by the way, would you be open to another way of achieving that? I mean, it was a kind of a nuanced conversation. But you don't need to spend 20 minutes explaining why you can't do that one little thing, just say no. Because what happens when you give that long explanation, it sounds like you're kind of being a little dishonest. You're kind of making stuff up and just be honest, man.
Exactly. It's funny. The greatest B2C, the business consumer businesses in the world are experts at this. And I just think it's such an opportunity for B2B. I mean, you think about like IKEA, right? IKEA is the #1 furniture retailer in the world, and it's a nightmare, right? You walk in and they give you a map. Like you need a map to go shopping.
I feel so good because I thought I was the only one that got lost in IKEA.
Yeah, and that's their purposeful design. When you find what you're looking for, there's nobody to help you. You got to write down the code or take a picture of it with your phone of where you get to go in the warehouse, pull the boxes off of a shelf that weigh 100 pounds onto a cart that doesn't have brakes, F-bomb your way through, jamming in the back of your car Tetris style. Getting home, there's 150 parts on the floor, no words on the work instruction other than like Svarta or some weird Scandinavian name. And when you get done, you're like, hey, you know what? That looks pretty good. We should go back and get the end table. It's crazy, but IKEA tells the world, listen, you're going to find it, pick it, pack it, shove it, assemble it. But we do that so we can give you modern Scandinavian design furniture that you didn't pay much for. And you keep coming back. People that walk in there don't walk out angry because expectations are set and met consistently. That's the goal here. That instead of having this funnel, everybody that's coming to you is qualified, or when they do come to you, you've got the opportunity to lead with, hey, listen, we're trying to be the best in the world at this. It means we don't do this, 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 and this. And so you tell me what's important. That also goes with pricing, right? If you're at the higher end of the market from a pricing perspective, like one of my clients was Adobe. They were competing with some smaller startups that were less expensive. And so they starting every conversation with prospects saying, hey, listen, the price, your investment here is probably going to be between X and Y. I know that's higher than what you might find otherwise on the market. My goal is to help show you why and why our customers sign up and are with us and stay with us. But if that's out of range, can we talk about that now versus later? They end up building trust. They disarm that conversation. It doesn't come up at the end. And they've differentiated in the way they sell. And, again, your most valuable asset that you have an inventory that you can convert to revenue isn't your solutions, isn't your products. It's your time.
Yeah.
Right. It'll never be any earlier than it is right now. If you're going to lose fast. And this is your opportunity to do that too. So you can spend your time cultivating and looking for opportunities where you're a better fit.
I totally agree with you. And it's interesting because, again, when it comes back to junior or salespeople who aren't as secure, oftentimes they want to skirt around that price issue. I guarantee you, in my experience, and I've coached probably nowhere near as many salespeople as you have, but I've coached my fair share. The product or service is always too high priced. Okay. They're like, oh man, the competition is we're way high. And I'm like, so how much, what's the magic number? And there is no magic number. It's just lower, exactly. And people want to skirt around that issue. And I don't mind. Like you said, just address it up front, but back to what you said earlier, the B2C companies get it right. I mean, can you imagine somebody going in and say like, well, why is this Mercedes or why is this Cadillac so expensive? No, they don't have to justify their price.
Exactly. It's like, why imagine somebody going into Costco and thinking, hey, listen, I need a full selection of ranch dressings. You only have Hidden Valley Ranch. Like you only have one. Why do I have to buy a gallon? Why do I have to buy 10 toothbrushes? Right? Why is somebody checking my receipt?
I'm sure, I guarantee you though, the customer service people at Costco do have that one person that comes up occasionally.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got somebody at the door checking your receipt to make sure you didn't steal anything. We don't give it another thought. You have to pay to walk in, right? Like you have to, and their renewal rate on those subscriptions, their memberships is like 98%. And I don't know who these 2% that don't are, but Costco's the number 2 retailer in the world behind Walmart. And it's not cool. Like it's not a good experience, but everybody that walks in walks out happy. And it's all about setting expectations, embracing.
Yeah, I'm detecting a pattern here, because like if you talk about IKEA and Costco, they make it's not fun being in the store. I mean, I was just at Costco a couple of days ago and I'm just like, whew, when I get out, but then I look at all the stuff we got and both of them sell you food at the end. You got meatballs or pizza, right?
Right. Exactly. $1.50.
Maybe that's the trick, man.
Yeah, that could be too. That's right. But
hey, let me ask you this. You wrote another book called The Transparent Sales Leader. Okay. Why is that important? And how is that, relevant?
Yeah, it's, I'll tell you, there's 2 things. Number one, you've brought this up twice already, that younger sales reps, they have trouble embracing this idea of transparency. And I believe that really most of that fault stems from their leaders and the way that they drive what they measure. That this old school philosophy of, hey, you got to have 4x your quota and pipeline at all times. What does that cause us to do? Fill our pipeline with 4x filled with crap and hold on to deals too long. And we're measuring the wrong things. But the Transparent Sales Leader is the wrong title for the book, first of all. My publisher is like, we should keep on that theme. Transparency leads better than pretending to be perfect. No doubt. But that would be a brochure. That wouldn't be a book. What the Transparent Sales Leader is based on this idea that back in 2008, I got promoted into my first leadership role. I was running field ops for a company in the Valley. And then the CEO was like, hey, you do the VP of sales role. Our previous guy is too expensive and he's a jerk. Okay. Right. So I get
being transparent.
Exactly. Right. Like that's why I think I got promoted. He, threw me into this role. It was my goal. Always. I wanted to run a tech company sales organization. Right. But 2 days into it, I'm looking around realizing I've never been trained. I have no idea what I'm doing. And most importantly, in sales, I always had a structure or a framework or a process, right? You got processes everywhere. Leaders, there's no framework. It basically felt like I was a dog chasing a car down the street every day, never knowing what direction it was going. Like when I would just about catch up, it would turn. And so I, being the nerd that I am, created a framework for revenue leadership. It's basically, I call it the 5 F's of maximizing revenue capacity, but there's 5 core responsibilities that a revenue leader has. I made them alliterative because I'm dumb and that's the only way I could remember them, but they all start with the letter F. And it basically encompasses all of your responsibilities. And once you get that nailed and internalized, you can use it to plan and strategize, use it for all your communications, up, down, side to side, the consistency. when the heat goes up in the kitchen, you always got that to fall back on, like crazy board meetings, i.e. missing a number right after you take a fundraise, which I don't recommend. But it makes you sound really smart too. And so that's the basis for the book is, transparency, absolutely. But having a framework that is optimized by science on a bed of transparency, that's where the magic happens. And that's really what the fundamental is about that book. Yeah.
And at the risk of sounding like I'm agreeing with everything you say, I pretty much, but it's funny because I've seen so many times where organizations, they'll be like, Mark or Nancy, you're a great salesperson. We're going to make you a sales leader. And what makes a great salesperson, the qualities of a great salesperson aren't always the same qualities that make a great sales leader. And I don't know if you've seen that and you have any thoughts about that?
All right. So this is the book I'm reading right now. It's sitting on my desk. Okay. It is called Sales Management. It's part of the Practical Salesmanship series from 1925 to 1927. I just bought the whole collection. That's
okay. Hey, just a quick aside, Todd. Do you know there's a thing called ebooks now?
I love the collection. Like, it just smells like the farthest corner of your grandma's old basement.
That's so funny.
And there's something about it that I love. Like, I love the staining on it's just, this stuff is just so cool to me. But literally, the beginning of this book talks about the position of being a sales leader and how different it is from being a salesperson, and how we can't be taking salespeople that happen to be the top performers and move them in, because you go from being fully independent as a salesperson to now going fully independent to going into this role where you're essentially fully dependent. It's a different role. It's a different responsibility. Now, what they talk about in this book, I find interesting, is they say you have to be an authoritarian and a supervisor. And I looked at that and I was like, and again, I was just reading this morning, so it's so fresh. I looked at that and I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound right. Authoritarian and a supervisor. But the way they wrote it, authoritarian just means, hey, listen, Mark, if you're my sales rep and on my team, it's to say, hey, listen, Mark, I'm more important than you. I'm not going to be a boss to anybody. We just have different responsibilities. We're still peers. You've got a responsibility to be our face and voice out in the field and doing good business and drumming all that up. I've got another responsibility to clear the field of the obstacles, to help get you where you want to go, to be your guide, to be somebody that's going to help you advance your career. But I also need some stuff from you. There's some requirements that I have from you, and that's the authoritarian side. The supervisor side is, hey, I need to be able to watch and understand what's going on at all times for me to be able to do my job best. Right? If I'm not supervising and seeing what's going on, I can't optimize, again, in my book, the 5 F's. If I have no idea what's going on, how do I do my job? And so that requires balance and a peer relationship between the two of us. And I was like, that's a good way to put it, right? Authoritarian supervisor sounds terrible, but when we look at it,
especially in the context of the world that we live in today, where anything authoritarian is kind of whoa,
Exactly.
People, you'd have the Gen Xers or Gen Z, whatever Gen we're in right now, the millennials running for the exits, right?
Right.
They would be like, no, But the way that you describe it, and I again agree with you, a good sales leader. One of the things they'll do is run interference for you, find out what resources you need, help you, maybe even help you get access to key people in key meetings, maybe, to come in and come along with you on a sales call. There is some opportunities for coaching, though, in my experience. Like you could be in a meeting and say, for example, maybe you want to have that little transparent conversation at the front versus at the end, something like that.
Exactly. Hey, would it help if I rattle off the 5 F's for you?
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I thought you were going to make me buy the book, but I'm okay. No, added bonus here.
I wrote the books just to get the ideas out there. Like literally, when I wrote the first book, I literally thought, hey, this book is going to suck because I've never written a book before. My high school
That's
English
a really great self-talk there.
Yeah, exactly. Like my high school English teacher is going to be laughing that I wrote a book. But I thought the book would come out. My friends would be like, oh, Todd, good for you. You wrote a book. And then I'd go get a CRO job again. The fact that I'm still doing this 6 years later is unbelievable to me. But the whole point of writing both of these is you can tell behind me, I love this profession. I really care about it. I hate that it drags the bottom of Gallup's annual ethical professions listing along with politicians every year. There's an opportunity for us to do right and to be service oriented. And if I can just make a few people do that. And so the 5 F's essentially are another opportunity to do that. That if we as leaders realize that one of the 5 F's is not fear, right? It's, there's a framework, there's a structure around what your responsibility is where we all win together. Man, like that's the opportunity. So what the 5 F's are is, again, if you internalize these, you could literally, as soon as you get done listening to this, get a whiteboard out. You could create a 30, 60, 90-day plan for yourself in 20 minutes. Like, you don't need to be calling your buddies like, hey, you got a business plan available? Just use the 5 F's. So all of your responsibilities as a revenue leader, sales, marketing, client success, BDR, like they all fall into one of these 5 categories. The first is you as a revenue leader have a responsibility to establish, maintain, and grow the team's focus. The focus meaning, are they calling on the right companies? Are the right firmographics, the right demographics within them with the right prerequisites? You got to establish and make sure there's no science projects going on. Number 2 is you then build the field. So the second F is the field organization, the team that takes the field every day to support that focus, meaning the right people with the right experience in the right places with the right tools and the right resources. The third F then is fundamentals. You got to make sure that that field team is doing the fundamentals right, the things they've got to get right consistently. Their messaging, their positioning, their qualification, discovery, presenting, demoing, proposing, negotiating, all that stuff. Your fourth F is then, who knew? You have to forecast. You've got a responsibility to predict the future. And forecasting is not just about, hey, what's coming in, but it's understanding the right KPIs and metrics and being proactive versus reactive. And then the fifth F, which is the cheesiest, but I would argue the most important. I use the word fun. And when I say fun, I'm not talking about parties and cotton candy and lollipops and all that. I mean culture. You've got a responsibility to optimize the intrinsic inspiration of your team so that they want to put in discretionary effort. They want to show up. They want to stay. They want to do their best. They want to advocate for you and your organization to their friends. Keeps turnover low. It keeps time to recruit fast as possible. Those are the 5. You could literally write them down and go, all right, where are we now? Where are our holes? What are the things that we could do to help optimize each one of these things? And here's the execution plan. You can do that in your back pocket anytime you're asked. And the last piece I'll say on that part is when I interviewed for my CRO role at Power Reviews, I was the, I believe, 13th candidate the CEO had brought in. And he had asked me, he was like, hey, what's your philosophy on sales leadership? Like, what's your structure? What do you think you're going to do? And I was like, hey, I'm glad you asked. And I went to the whiteboard. I wrote the 5 F's up there. He was freaking blown away. He was just like, I've never seen or heard anybody that has an actual structure or framework. And I got the offer the next day.
Wow.
I don't say that because I'm smarter or any better. I'm telling you, you have a framework, you're going to sound smarter than 98% of the world immediately. And I mean, I could use all the help I could get. So there you go.
Well, no, that's awesome. I love the 5 F's. And I totally agree that you should have a structure, whether it's you're an individual producer or you're leading a team, you need to have a process, a structure to it. I've written a couple books as well. And the people ask, well, why would you write a book? Because, nobody makes any money from books. And part of my answer is I have all these ideas that I've used from time to time in a kind of an ad hoc fashion. And I wanted to put some structure around the ideas, because and then also, so I wouldn't forget, because sometimes you're like, why didn't I think about that? Because so just putting everything down pen to paper is really important. And it's interestingly enough, part of my first book was also about having fun on an individual basis. I said it was how to become a top performing salesperson and enjoy every step of the way. Because if you're enjoying something, you're going to do it more often. You're going to do it more often. You're going to get better at it. And guess what happens when you get better at it? It becomes fun, right? So, totally with you. But that was more on the individual side. When we come to the team side, what are some things that a leader can do to create that culture of fun?
Well, it's funny. I have a model for that too.
Okay.
But I call
there
it
are
the
models nested in models, nested in models.
Exactly. Blow your brains out, right? And I try to make them as alliterative as possible because, again, I'm not that smart. But I call it the praise model. But essentially, there's 6 things that drive us intrinsically to show up, stay, do our best, and advocate. And so praise is simply, number one is predictability, right? We do our best work when we can predict.
Sure.
When there's consistency. When we go to bed at night, we know what we're getting ourselves into the next day. That's on a macro level. Organizations can and should be doing a better job of helping their teams predict. But as a leader, are you consistent? Are you helping your team and the individuals within it know what's coming?
Right.
The R then is recognition. We do our best work when we're recognized for our efforts, when there's validation, status, feedback, where, we do all this work. Do people see it? Right? If you don't see it, then that's disengages. The A is then the aim of our work, meaning what is the aim or the mission or the purpose of my work? Is it to hit a quota, or is this actually making an impact on our customers and their customers? If you can create an environment where your team members know that what they're doing is helping customers, and I can go on and on about examples of this that have taken turnover down to almost zero in organizations just by flipping the switch that your purpose in life is not hitting a quota. Your purpose is to help your customers achieve optimal outcomes in life.
That's just such an amazingly different conversation than most companies have, because it's all about the quota. It's all about the quota, which takes you the whole mindset away from serving, right? I mean, it's just going in the wrong direction there.
Exactly. That's exactly right. The I is independence, meaning we do our best work when we're trusted, when we're given the resources and latitude to do our best work with minimal oversight, right? The opposite of that, of course, is micromanagement. And then the S is security or safety, meaning we do our best work when we're part of a pack, when we feel like we're part of a family, like we feel like there's no knife or hatchet swinging behind our head, right? Creating environments where we're all in this together. We're part of a family or a pack. And then the E is equitability, meaning, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it fair? Is there politics? Like, politics are the quickest way to erode engagement and intrinsic inspiration, where somebody is getting paid more or getting, more of those other elements, more recognition, more of those types of things than me doing the same level of work and getting the same results, right? So the lack of politics is big. So predictability, recognition, aim, independence, security, equitability. If you can just write those 6 down, have them on a little sticky pad on your monitor, and look for ways to optimize each one of those, you'll create a culture where you're going to love to work there too.
That is awesome. I, again, agree with all of this. I've always said, though, that salespeople are motivated by recognition, autonomy, and or compensation, or a mix of those 3. And I was waiting for you to say compensation, something to, but I think it comes in with the last one, the equitability.
Yes. Because
study after study shows that most people, they're not concerned necessarily bottom line how much they're making. They want to be treated equitably with others, right? And so if you find out that, hey, you know what, I'm not making exactly what I wanted to, but we're all making roughly about the same, it's okay. But if I find out that, Todd's making 3 times everybody else and it doesn't seem like he's doing that, then it's not fair. And then all of a sudden I'm not happy.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, when you think about compensation comes in the form of, extrinsic dollars.
Yeah.
But the intrinsic pieces are those other 5 too.
Yeah.
Meaning, again, if your aim matters and you freaking love what you do and the impact you're having, you don't care how much you get paid, right? So as those other ones go higher, the need for the extrinsic goes down. And that's all part of the balance. If you're missing any of those 6 completely, you're going to have a tough time. So you got to make sure you've got all 6 of those. And the way you balance those, again, like somebody says, hey, Mark, come over to my house and hey, we're going to grab some shovels. We're going to dig some holes in the backyard. You're going to be like, no.
What? Like what?
And I'm like, hey, Mark, I'm going to pay you $10,000 for every hole you build. You're going to be like, where's the shovel?
Right.
Right. So, like, obviously, extrinsic motivation matters, but it's not sustainable. If you want to create a sticky environment where not only your team stays, but they're going to parties talking about how great it is and, hey, we got jobs open, you should come. That's when you've got all of those things balanced, and extrinsic becomes the reward for doing work you love to do and not the reason you do it.
That's awesome. I know that you do various sales workshops. And I'm wondering, can you explain a little bit about the format? I mean, do you do them on site? Are they virtual? Do you do follow-up coaching sessions? Do you coach individual producers or individual leaders? This is your chance to.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I don't do is I don't really dig the one-on-one consulting.
Mm-hmm.
Like I tried it. Like when I wrote the books, I was like, I'm going to try all these things, and the consulting, it's not really my jam. So my primary business is focused on workshops. So on the individual contributor side, I teach that foundation of decision science, right? We know how people engage, prioritize, and trigger purchase decisions. Let's learn that and then apply it for good, not evil, to your messaging, your positioning, your presenting, like how you tell a story. And then the most popular program I teach is negotiating. I teach something called transparent negotiating, which might be the subject of another book coming soon. But so I do teach workshops a lot on site. I do a lot virtually. Those are typically like the way that I've designed them, being a former multi-time CRO myself. If this takes you 2 days, 3 days to learn it, 6 months from now, you're never going to use it. And so I've tried to design these to be head slapping, like, of course, that's how I think, that's how I do it. And then immediately actionable. So I give you things that you can go use that afternoon, the virtual or the in-person ones, do the workshop. And then there is a reinforcement that happens a few weeks later that just kind of sparks those neurons again. And we do a Q&A. Everybody has homework. So we make it as optimized for the way we learn and action as possible. That's on the sales side. The leadership side, I do a series of leadership programs that teach the 5 F's, and then we optimize each one. So I just signed a client I guess it was yesterday, that we're going to do 6 virtual programs 2 weeks apart, where they learn the framework, get some homework, try it, learn a piece, get some homework, try it. And then at the end, there's a reinforcement at the end. They get to record all of it. This will all be virtual. So they can make it an internal trading asset for themselves too.
That is excellent.
And by the way, the side note is I do a lot of keynotes. I've already got 8 kickoffs scheduled. So we're recording this at the beginning of December. My schedule from January 7th through the middle of February is bananas, but I love doing the speeches and the keynotes, really talking about the power of transparency and turning that into your superpower.
Awesome. Love it. Hey, I got to ask you one more question, because, you've got the 115-year-old phone behind you there. You have these 100-year-old sales books. But technology is just, it becomes increasingly important in terms of some of the tools that salespeople use. And I'm not talking about CRMs. I'm talking about sales enablement and prospecting and some of these other kind of tools. I mean, you got tools that will listen to your Zoom calls and then tell you, hey, here's what you have to do. And by the way, you need to make more eye contact, all kinds of kind of creepy stuff. What tools do you use, or are you most impressed with?
Well, I'll tell you, the phone, part of the reason I have this 1908 phone behind me is the phone was arguably the greatest gift ever given to the sales profession.
Yeah.
Right. Alexander Graham Bell, the notorious AGB. He in 1876 made the first phone call. By the 1910s, you started seeing cold calling start to happen. So I've got scripts from 1910, 1912, 1914, the first ones I've been able to find. Sales at the time was trusted, was respected, it was almost admired. In 1916, they had the first big sales conference of all time took place in Detroit, attended by 3,000 people. It's called the World Sales Congress. Their keynote speaker was then sitting president Woodrow Wilson.
Wow.
Right? So you got the then sitting president speaking at a sales conference as the rest of the world is getting into World War I, because they viewed sales as being an important opportunity for us to establish ourselves as a world superpower, right? Where the rest of the world's fighting, when we do right by our customers, sell the right solution to the right people at the right time at the right price, we lift all boats and we all win from that. In the early 1910s, sales was taught at every college, like every university. It was actually taught in high schools in the 1910s.
Wow.
And then it went away. Why? Because I believe technology ruined it. Right? Like we took this great gift and we ruined it. We needed technology built to help prevent salespeople from using it, with caller ID and all of that. That didn't work. We needed the do not call registry, which in 2021 had 221 million phone numbers on it. Like AGB would be rolling over knowing that we ruined it. We did the same exact thing with email. Incredible gift. Needed technology to help block it. Didn't work. We needed the Canned Spam Act. We did the same. We started to do the same thing with video. I see us doing the same thing with AI. My point being that technology is good when used through the lens of service. How do we deploy technology to do a better job of being able to help our customers and their customers achieve optimal outcomes? Any technology through that lens is good, but again, we tend to ruin things. And again, I've probably got 10 emails in my inbox right now that are AI generated that make me want to go cry myself to sleep. I think with all of these technologies, AI for me has been really, really valuable in helping me prepare, for helping me understand the lens of what are my customers think when they first engage with a potential customer. It's saving me time. It's doing a lot of my homework for me so that I can become optimized. And I'm only doing it through the lens of service to my customers. And so for anything that you're thinking of, the minute the dirty word scale enters your brain, you're doing it wrong. We got to take a step back. And so there's so many technologies out there that can help us service more customers more optimally and use our time more valuably. But that word scale, man, got to get rid of it.
That is awesome. And use them for as agents of good, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, Todd, your knowledge and enthusiasm for sales is contagious. I've written down a couple book titles, and I'm going to go and look at your blog and find the other ones. I just want to say I learned a lot, and I really appreciate you coming on the Grow Fast podcast.
Yeah. And if like the Sales History podcast is out there for anybody, it's just a monologue where I research a topic and then I just teach you about it for 12 to 20 minutes. No guests on that one. So if you're a nerd for the sales history stuff, scroll through that. There might be a topic. Sales History
podcast. The other thing I was going to ask you is if people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
The website, toddcaponi.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I share a lot of my nonsense there, but either one, I'm pretty easy to find, I think.
I will put links in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
All right, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.